a little bit about my life before I knew God, how I came to know Him, my conversion story, and then where I am today because of that. So back to the beginning. I grew up in a broken home, so my parents divorced before I was 2 years old. And so I spent my childhood 3.5 days at my mom's, 3.5 days at my dad's, going back and forth. And there was a lot of things at each home, each household, that were really hard to go through. And through that childhood, through that difficulty, I came away with 2 desires. One of my desires was to know God. I don't think I would have been able to verbalize it like that back then, but I definitely had that God-shaped hole, and I was looking to fill that hole in my heart. And the second desire I had was to be married for life. I knew at a young age that I did not want to raise a family like the one I grew up in. I wanted a family that was together, unified, and that stayed together for life. So with this, knowing my 2 desires, I met my husband when I was 12 years old. And this is why I love a group of ladies, because there's always like, oh, I have pictures like this. So when I was 12, he was 13, we met on a school bus. No joke. And right away, I was having all the feelings of love. I was like, oh my gosh, this boy's so cute. I want to marry him. I didn't tell him yet. I didn't want to freak him out. But I had big plans. And so right away, I was like infatuated with him. I had these feelings of love. I just wanted to go wherever he wanted to go. So we started dating when I was 13 and he was 14. And at that time, his family decided to invite me to church with them. My husband was raised Catholic, so they went to Mass every Sunday. And so they asked if I wanted to come to church, and I'm like, well, that's kind of awkward, like to be with his family, I don't know. But they told me, well, Aaron goes every Sunday. And again, I wanted to go where Aaron went, so I was like, okay, I'll go to Mass. So I started going to Mass every Sunday, became my weekly routine. And I was a pretty stubborn teenager. I was pretty stubborn. I still am stubborn. But I remember telling Aaron's family, I will never be Catholic. Like, that church, there's like so many rules, and you can't do this, or you can't do that. And that was my view. But inside, in my heart, going to Mass every Sunday, there was a lot of things about the church that felt like a home, felt like that unified home for the first time in a long time. So I kept going to Mass every Sunday. Aaron and I were dating. And I've seen this pattern in my life multiple times, where I see this light and darkness together. So during this time, I'm going to Mass every Sunday. So I have this beautiful light where I'm, in the presence of Jesus every week. And at the same time, I saw this darkness kind of coming into my life. The devil wanting to speak into my life. And so, again, wanting to be married for life, I was looking at the world of how does that happen? I couldn't look to my family for that answer of how to do that. And so I turned to the world, and the world teaches us that it teaches us to just give away ourselves, right? To settle for compromise. And so when I was 14 years old, I gave my virginity away to Aaron. And it still is something that makes me sad, because I think back to that girl that I was, that teenager, and ladies, I really didn't know how great I was. I didn't know that I was created with this dignity and femininity, and I didn't know about this gift of virginity that God created in me, and that it was for my husband. I didn't know that. I just didn't know. So I gave this part of myself away that I would never get back. And right away, the relationship changed. Immediately, everything was different. Everything was complicated. Because when we enter into sexual intimacy, we have this hormone in our brain that's released called oxytocin. So I was having this oxytocin, which oxytocin is designed by God for a marriage. And what it does in our brains is it binds and blinds. It makes us feel completely unified and close to the person. And it also blinds us to their faults. So in a marriage, it's this beautiful hormone that helps us feel bonded, and then maybe not notice the socks that are on the floor with our husband. It mutes those points of the relationship in a marriage. But outside of a marriage, it's really dangerous. So I had this oxytocin. Our relationship started to get really confusing, and everything was messy. It was like we were kind of married, kind of not, trying to figure it out. I had all these expectations, like I would from a husband, from this teenager. So Aaron and I one Sunday went to church. We didn't even go to the Catholic church because at that point we didn't even know the difference. And we decided to go to church by ourselves. So we went to this Protestant church, and the pastor was talking about this key. He had this metaphor for a key. And he was saying that everybody has a key. They're given this key, and we use it to unlock the problems of our heart. We use this key to unlock healing. You know, when we're suffering, when we're struggling, we have this key that we can unlock that trouble. And here I was as a teenager, and I was totally confused. I was depressed. I had all this anxiety. I was hurting myself at that time. I was not in a good place. And I left that church, and I was really upset because I knew that I did not have that key that he was talking about. And so being the stubborn girl that I was, I went to Aaron's dad, and I was like, where's my key? What is up with this? And I told him what the pastor had said, and he listened, and Aaron's dad's been a mentor for me for many years. And he listened to me, and finally he said, do you want to know what I think? And I'm like, I guess. And he's like, I think you get your key through baptism. So I wasn't baptized at that point. I didn't have any faith. I didn't even know what the word meant. And I'm like, okay, well, what's baptism? Let me go do that and get my key. I want my key. So I started in RCIA, which is Rite of Christian Initiation for Adults. That means when an adult wants to come into our church, they go through this program. It's a different process than a baby or a child that becomes Catholic. So I started this program to get my key, and I started at our church in Half Moon Bay. And during that time, I started to learn about God's teachings and His beautiful plan for us as women. And a lot of it was starting to make sense, but in my heart, I just didn't feel ready to give up the life that I was living. I just was kind of gripping onto it, and I had plans. I'm like, well, I'm going to marry this teenager, and I don't know if I don't know if this really works for me. So I was kind of going back and forth, not feeling really ready to change it. And so at the end of high school, I was college touring with my mom. We went to Oregon, Colorado, California, just kind of toured around. And this was the first time that I ever felt God calling me to do something very clearly. I knew that He wanted me to go to University of Colorado in Boulder. And I'm like, that's really far. Are you sure? So I knew that I had to go there. And it was very scary because my relationship with Aaron, I'm like, well, what's going to happen to us? Are we going to stay together? Are we going to break up? That's really far away. Aaron didn't really like the idea either. And I just kept telling him, I just need to go. So at the end of that year, in 2011, I moved to Colorado. And within 2 months of being there, Aaron and I broke up. Couldn't handle the distance. And that was it. So it was a really, really hard time for me. I felt really broken, very sad. This relationship that I felt like I gave all of myself to was just over. And here I was in Colorado, dealing with that. So at that point, again, this pattern of light and darkness came back in my life. So I was in RCIA still. I kind of continued the program in Colorado. And it was amazing. It was a great program. There was tons of people coming into the church, young people. And I just felt so blessed, and I loved learning about the faith. I was really starting to fall in love with the teachings, but at the same time, I had this darkness. And so I was feeling broken. I had that God-shaped hole that I had tried to put Aaron into. He didn't fit. Now Aaron wasn't filling any of the God-shaped hole, and I was broken. And so at that point in Colorado, I fell into sexual sin again. And so I want to just talk a minute about my understanding of sin. At this point, I fell again, and I felt this brokenness. And I thought of it kind of, like a mirage. So if you think you're on this path, and you're really thirsty, and you're walking, and you see this water, what looks like water out in front of you, and you start walking toward it, and meanwhile, God's walking beside you going, I have water. I want to give you what you need. I want to give you the desire that you have. And at that point, I'm like, no, it's okay. I see it. And so I'm walking to this, and I get there, and it's not water. It was a mirage. And so then I'm left more thirsty, right? I'm left more thirsty than I was, and there's no water. And so I think when we choose that sin, we're really compromising. Because God wants to give us the desires of our heart. He wants to fill that God-shaped hole. And so when we choose sin, we're compromising for something less than. So I continued in this kind of conflict, light and darkness, and I got to a point where I was just tired. I was so tired of the devil's lies. I was tired of that compromise. And so I decided to just pick up my cross and really face that brokenness that I was experiencing. And so I decided that I would just start learning about the faith, really accepting the teachings and start applying them, letting them soak in. And so I decided that I was going to take RCIA and actually apply it, actually form my conscience. And I really had this desire to, instead of just know about God, I really wanted to know Him. And so I started wanting this relationship with Him. And in RCIA, I was able to start forming that for the first time. So as I was doing that, I went through this conflicting time. This is the church that I was in RCIA at, in Boulder. And I went through this conflicting time because the more that I learned about God's plan for me, how He created me as a woman, this beauty, this femininity, this dignity, the more that I learned about that and His plan, the more hurt I had. Because I kind of felt like I had messed it up. I felt like when I was 14, I made these choices and I can't undo those. So what does that mean for somebody like me? And so I kind of, I went back and forth between, well, this makes sense, and I love how God designed this womanhood, but at the same time, aren't I too far gone? Didn't I screw that up? That was how I was feeling. And so I kind of was going back and forth, and God definitely stirred up that desire in me again to be married for life. And I started feeling that again. I'm like, okay, how can I do that? How can I be married for life? And so I looked to the church, and I realized, this is how. The Catholic Church, it's a sacrament of marriage. It's for life. It's until death do we part. I mean, there's no undoing it. It's for life. So on April 7, 2012, I was baptized, confirmed, and I received Jesus in the Eucharist for the first time. And these are some of my favorite words ever spoken to me to this day. Hannah, I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. That's me starting a new life. Literally becoming a new Hannah. It was amazing. So toward the end of college, I was baptized. The school year's, finishing up, and I started having health problems. My heart was doing crazy stuff, and so I decided to move back to California, get healthy, and frankly figure out what Aaron and what our plan was going to be, because I was still thinking about him. So I moved home, and right away connected back with Aaron, and we're trying to figure out, are we together? Are we not together? Like, what's the plan, And I still had this longing to be married for life, and I'm trying to figure this out. And pretty quickly after I moved home, I learned that he had fallen into sin with somebody else. And that was, to this day, one of the saddest times that I went through, because I really felt like that gift that I had given him, that gift, like I gave him everything I had, and it just felt like he just gave it away, like it was nothing. And I knew I couldn't get it back. And I kind of was, thinking into the future, still wanting to be married to Aaron, and I had to come to terms that this would be part of our story now. That this, these sins with other people would be part of our story. And that was really hard for me to accept. That wasn't my plan from the beginning. So it was a really tough time. And I prayed a lot, and I journaled a lot. And it was a beautiful time in the same way, because I was suffering. I was so sad, broken. And yet I was really close to Jesus. I was really telling him all about it. Instead of just, God already knows how upset I am, I was inviting Christ into that and asking him, like, help me through this, like, I'm broken. And so it was a beautiful time. I journaled a lot, and I kept coming back to these words. I gave him everything I had. I gave him everything I had. And I would just cry tears over those words. And there was one morning that I woke up, and the first thing, I opened my eyes and I heard God speak to me. And he said, you gave him everything you had, not everything you have. And it just hit me. And it was a turning point for me, because I really started realizing that I was not too far gone. That dignity, that beauty, that femininity was still a part of me, even more so in so many ways. That who I was at that time was so different than who I was at 14. And so I started to see this chance at redemption, like, okay, maybe I can, still have this chance at being married for life, of having this marriage and having, the dreams and desires of my hearts come true. So toward the end of that year, I heard about this conference called Seek. And again, I felt 100% God was calling me to this conference. I knew that he wanted me to be there. And so I'm like, oh my goodness. Well, the problem is it's in Florida, and I'm in California, and I don't have any money. And I was just turning this point in my health journey. And so I just started praying, God, provide a way. I really want to go to this conference. So not only did I get a plane ticket out to Colorado, but from Colorado, I had a bus ticket all the way to Florida. I took a bus from Colorado to Florida. I can't even bear the thought now, like sitting in a chair is like uncomfortable for 20 minutes. I'm like, how did I do that? And I went all the way to Florida, and I got to this conference, and it was so beautiful. It was the first time that I heard about chastity. It was the first time I had it explained to me. I heard the word, and I was like, yeah, the chastity belt. No sex before marriage, right? Like, I was like, yeah, I know chastity. But it was the first time that I really heard it explained the truth about chastity, which is it's not about the no, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. It's about this yes, that we get to love another person, right? And we get to remove that part of the relationship where there's that oxytocin, there's that blindness going on. We get to actually love another person, not just lust after them, right? And it was this beautiful thing, because I'm like, oh, I want that. I want to receive that love, I want to know that this relationship is based on love, not just lust. So I was hearing about chastity. I was hearing about what love is, which I always thought was a feeling. And Aaron's dad had told us for years, love's a decision, and we would just tell him, you're too old, you don't understand. But he was right. It really is a decision. It's wanting the good for the other person, right? Deciding to do what's best for them rather than what we want to do. So I was learning all of this, and ladies, I just got super excited about chastity. Like, it was like my favorite word. I was like, chastity? I was so excited. I came back to California, and I told Aaron, I was like, he's going to be stoked when he finds out about chastity. Like, he's going to love this. So got together with him, and I'm like, oh my gosh, let me tell you all about it. It's this like call to love, authentic love though, and like, it's, then you don't have sex in marriage, so then you don't have this part that's confusing. He's like, wait, what? Slow down. He's like, I don't know about that. And it was shocking. I was like, wait, what? I thought this was like the coolest thing. So I had to come to terms with the fact that, he might not be on board with that. So I'm going to talk about something I call the power of invitation. And in order to do that, we have to go back to the beginning in the garden, when God created man and woman. And so when God, puts Adam to sleep, takes his rib, like we heard about, from the heart to be an equal, Adam sees her and he says, "At last, the man exclaimed, this one is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She will be called woman because she was taken from man." So this is the first time that he's seeing her. Like, I can't imagine that moment, right? He's seeing her and he's in awe of her. That's how I would describe those words. He's in awe. And so God created this relationship between men and women to have this awe between the man and woman. Men are, they just are in awe of women. We are the most beautiful part of creation. Literally, we're like the last thing God created, because that was it. We're like the most beautiful part. So knowing that, knowing how we're created with dignity, femininity, and this amazing beauty, and knowing that men are, they just are in awe of women. It makes sense that when Eve offers Adam the apple, if you look at the picture, he's not even looking at the apple. He's just like looking at Eve, like whatever it is, right? Like, hand it to me. He's just staring at Eve. He's in awe of her. So it says, the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom. She took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. So I think every one of us ladies in this room has this power of invitation. Because of how men see us and they're in awe of us, we have this power to invite a man into something holy. And here we see Eve using that power to invite a man into sin, right? She was using, the devil can twist everything. So she's using this beautiful God-given power to invite this man into sin. So here I was in California, I was super excited about chastity, told Aaron about it, he wasn't super excited about chastity, and I'm thinking, well, I have this power, like, to invite him to chastity, right? And I know my dignity, I know my femininity, like, let me just try it. So I just made this commitment that I was going to be chaste, and I invited him into this holy thing, right? I was like, do it with me, like, let's be chaste. And sure enough, Aaron decided to do it. He was in awe, and he decided, okay, let's try this. So we started being chaste, trying to change our relationship, and pretty quickly into that process, we fell. We fell right back to where we were. And this time was so different because I knew better. I was Catholic. I knew the teachings. I knew God's plan for me. I knew better. And so I just remember feeling dirty and broken and just disgusting with myself. I just felt so awful because I knew better. Like, how could I do this? I was baptized. I'm in the church. Like, how could I do that? I just felt horrible. And in this moment, I clearly remember two voices in my life speaking. One from the devil saying, you've gone too far. Like, God doesn't want you now. You knew better. You shouldn't have done that. Like, you've gone too far. Just let it go. Keep doing it. What's the big deal, right? And then I had this voice of God saying, there is nothing that's too far for me to bring you back to me. Like, my love can always bring you back, right? Just come back to me. Like, I want to forgive you. I want to love you. So I had these two voices speaking. And by the grace of God, I went straight to confession. And I just received that mercy, that forgiveness. And I was, totally clean. I remember leaving the confessional and being like, I felt weightless. I just felt so much better. And so Aaron and I, decided to try chastity again, but we realized this time that we needed God's help. This was not something that we could just change in our relationship by our strong will and make it work. This was going to be an undertaking and a total transformation to be chaste, to be pure. And so we realized we need to be praying about it, we need to have a plan, and we really need to talk to God about this. And so in that relationship, real love started to grow. The lust was removed, real love started to grow. Our relationship was slowly shifting. I was seeing this love that I really had the desire for. I was seeing that start to come out of this man. I was like, wow, this is so awesome. So using my power of invitation again, because I knew it worked the first time, I was like, hey Aaron, I'm going to go back to RCIA for fun this time. Would you like to come? And he's like, well, I don't know, when is it? And I'm like, every Monday night, just to learn about our faith, like, do you want to come with me? And so he followed, he's like, okay. And so every Monday night we started going to RCIA. And it was really in that time, in that class, that our total relationship transformed. It was just like, we actually put God in the middle of our relationship. You know, we cut out this time in our week, and we put him in the center where he belonged, and everything else just started falling into place. And we didn't have that oxytocin, we didn't have that lust, we weren't in sin. So our relationship just started to have this love in it, and God at the center, and things were shifting. And so a couple months into RCIA, Aaron and I were hanging out at his parents' house, and he invited me to go watch the sunset. I'm like, well, that's romantic, okay. So we walk out of his parents' house, and there's this golf cart sitting there, and I'm like, oh, of course, we're not going to walk to see the sunset. We're going to take a golf cart. Of course, because knowing my husband, anything that has a motor, anything that he can soup up, make run fast, like, he does it. So we get in this golf cart, and we take this golf cart up all the mountains behind his parents' house, and we watch the sunset. And on our way back down all of the mountains, we start going really fast. And at first I was like, okay, this is fun. Then we started going faster and faster and faster and faster and faster, and all of a sudden Aaron yells, jump! And I'm like, what? And he yells again, jump! And so I jump out of the golf cart. And I like tumble down the hill, there's dust flying. It's like a movie scene, literally. It's like quiet, I don't see Aaron, I don't see the golf cart. I'm just like, what just happened? It's dusk. So I'm looking around, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, if something happened to this man, you know? And I hear in the distance, Hannah. And I'm like, oh my goodness, he's fine. And at that moment, I realized, oh man, I still love him so much, you know? Out of all the stuff we've been through, all the hurt, I still like really care about this man. And so he like army crawls up the mountain toward me, and he's like, will you be my girlfriend? And I was like, yes. So that began our courtship in true like movie drama form. So I gave him a kiss, we walked and we found the golf cart which had hit a tree. So he just needed to come back, fix the brakes, which had clearly gone out, and then it would be fine. And so we walked back to his parents' house and we're like, oh my gosh, we're like a couple again, hey. So that began our courtship. And so about 6 months of this, we courted, which I see the difference of courtship and dating as pure and purposeful. So our relationship before when we were dating, right, it was impure, and it was just kind of to have fun, to spend time together. All of a sudden, though, now we're courting, and so it's pure and then purposeful. I didn't want to just kill time or spend time or not be lonely. I wanted to have a purpose behind that relationship and find out if this was the man God wanted me to marry, right? So pure and purposeful. So we were courting for about 6 months, and then one Monday night, Aaron asked me if he could pick me up a little early for RCIA and take me to adoration. Okay, handsome man asks you to take you to adoration. I don't know, it was an easy, no-brainer for me, so I'm like, yeah. So he takes me early to adoration. We just sat there in the pew in front of Jesus. And it was so peaceful just to be in front of him, let him love on us. And it was just this beautiful moment together. And we go to RCIA after, and we get to class, and class starts just like it does every Monday. everyone goes around the circle and they say a God moment, something that stood out to them that week. So we're going around the circle, and meanwhile, Aaron has this thermos. Could you hold that up? Literally, ladies, it's like this big. Thank you. Okay, he has a thermos of water that he is like chugging off to the side. And it was confusing because I didn't know men knew how to hydrate. So I was like, what is happening? And I kept asking him, like, are you okay? And he's like, oh yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine. And he's drinking water. And I'm like, what's happening? So we go around the whole room, and everyone shares their God moment. I share mine. And then it gets to Aaron, who's last. And he goes into this speech. And my husband, he's more introverted. Talking in front of a group is not in his comfort zone. So he starts this speech in front of our class about our relationship, how it transformed, how God totally changed him into this godly man, how much he loves me, this like beautiful woman that I am. Oh my gosh, this is like the sweetest God moment. And then he got on one knee, and he said, Hannah, I want to love you, serve you, and guide you closer to God for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me? I asked him today, I was like, this is the quote I have. This is what you said, right? Like pregnant brain, double checking. He's like, that's what I said. So I said yes. And on our way home from RCIA, I said, Aaron, I just have this one goal for our engagement. And he's like, when is it? And I was like, I want to plan our marriage more than our wedding. And he's like, okay, me too. So for the next 7 months, we planned this amazing marriage. We did marriage prep every week, every Friday night, talked about everything you can imagine, and tried to really get on the same page, right? And 7 months after this, we got married, May 10th, 2014. He's awesome. So it was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day. So I want to talk about these 4 qualities of a marriage. So on the cross, when Jesus dies on the cross, he teaches us how to love our spouse through these 4 qualities: free, total, faithful, and fruitful. So the first one is free, right? Jesus freely goes to the cross. He has free will, and he chooses to go through this for us. And in a marriage, we have to be free, right? On our wedding day, we're free. Nobody's forcing us into this. We choose to marry that man. The second thing, total. Jesus gave himself totally to us on the cross, to the point of death. And in our marriage, Aaron and I decided very early on in our engagement that we were not going to abuse our marriage with the use of contraception. That we wanted to love each other 100%, not 80%. And so it's really beautiful for a man to say, I want all of you. I want to love every part of you, right? Instead of, but the fertility part, could you take something and get rid of that, and then I'll love the rest of you, right? No, he wants to love 100% of me. So it's this total love. And then the next thing, faithful. Jesus was completely faithful to the Father's will, even asking, can you remove this from me? And when the answer was no, he went through that for us, right? And so he calls us, God calls us in our marriage to be completely faithful to our spouse. He even says, if you look at another woman with lust, you commit adultery with her in your heart, right? So not even faithfulness in our actions, but he elevates it to our thoughts. Our thoughts, our words, our actions are faithful to our spouse. And the last thing, fruitful, it's this openness to life. And we see through this suffering how fruitful Jesus was, right? I mean, he underwent the most intense suffering that you could possibly imagine. And through that suffering, all of our salvation, our new life, came to be. And so we as women have this beautiful opportunity to grow a human and through suffering, bring a new life into the world, just like Jesus taught us how to do. So here's an extra slide of fruitful for you ladies. I know I'm going to get an aww. That's Benjamin and Adeline's Christmas photo. And there's our new daughter. I know. They're really cute. Okay, can I change it? Okay, I'm gonna. So these are some tips that I came up with that really helped Aaron and I stay here in our relationship. So they spelled chaste, one of my favorite words. So we have communicate the goal, have a plan, acknowledge your success, sacrifice, turn back around, and emphasize God. So the first thing, communicate the goal. This was really important for us, right? Especially shifting from a relationship that wasn't chaste. We had to be really clear with each other, this is okay and this is not okay, right? So we communicated those boundaries and we were really specific. And then, if you're single, talk to God about those boundaries. Talk to Him about your goals for staying pure. H, have a plan. So we would decide every time we'd have a date how we were going to spend that time. Because it was during those open-ended plans, like, we'll just hang out, that it would be really tempting to stay pure. So having a plan of like, okay, we're going to a movie, but then I'm going to be home at this time. And this person's expecting me at that time, right? Like having a plan set up really helped us to not compromise how we were spending our time. And then A, acknowledge your success. This was huge, especially because my husband receives love and words of affirmation. So giving him that affirmation of like, thank you. Thank you for loving me, and not just lusting after me. Like, thank you for making this commitment and sacrifice for me. Like, that really means a lot. And like, we're actually doing this. This is awesome. It meant a lot. It really helped us affirm us, keep the positivity going. And for him, especially, to receive those words of affirmation was important. S is sacrifice. So, like we talked about love being a decision, love requires a sacrifice. Wanting the best for someone is a sacrifice, right? Because we have to remove our own selfish desires out of it. So wanting to bring him closer to God was like that sacrifice. Okay, I'm sacrificing desires to actually love this man. And he was doing the same for me. And we have to understand men and women are seduced differently. Women are seduced by what we hear. So if we hear a man tell us like, oh baby, I'm gonna love you forever, like it's no big deal, like just come over. Like it's really hard to hear that and not be like, oh my gosh, he's gonna love me forever. Like it's really hard, right? What guys say to us is really impactful. So in this different way, women or men are seduced by what they see. So it's our job, the man's job to be modest with what he says. It's our job to be modest how we dress. Because we are the most beautiful part of creation, right? I mean, we have to cover those parts of ourselves that are distracting for the men. So it's this difference of being looked at, which we all know how to be looked at, right? We know how to wear this a certain way. We know how to be looked at, how to be noticed. But if we want to be seen, we have to kind of cover those parts of our outer selves so that we can reveal our inner selves to somebody and really be known, be seen, rather than just looked at. So sacrifice. T is turn back around. This was really key for me. Like I said, we started Chastity, we fell. And in that moment, I decided I'm going to turn back around to God. I stopped listening to that voice of, oh, you've gone too far. And I started listening to that voice of, come back to me. I love you, you've never gone too far, right? God's voice. So if you fall, go back to God. And we see the difference right here between Judas and Peter. Both Jesus' friends. Both really were not very good friends at one moment to him, right? Denying and betraying him. Yet the difference that, that I see between the two is that Judas, he listened to that voice of, you've gone too far. It's too late. You've totally left your friend. Look what he's gone through. It's just over. And Peter, our first pope, right? He actually accepted the forgiveness and the mercy that God wanted to offer him. And so we have the difference between a suicide and this thing. And the last tip I have is emphasize God. This should really be the first tip, but it wouldn't spell chaste, so just, it's okay. I had to come to terms with it being the last. But if we look at this triangle, we see God at the top, him and her. As each of you each climb toward God individually, the distance between you actually decreases, right? You become closer. by each getting closer to God. So bring the other person closer to God than yourselves. And I love this quote: "A woman's heart should be so hidden in the Lord that a man has to seek him just to find her." So I want to end with this quote. This is by St. Pope John Paul II. "It is Jesus you seek when you dream of happiness. He is waiting for you when nothing else you find satisfies you. He is the beauty which you are so attracted to. It is He who provoked you with that thirst for fullness that will not let you settle for compromise."